What does the future of the center position actually look like for the Pacers? They want to go by committee this year. Is that the answer long term? What does history say? What do the current players suggest? And who could actually be available as a target for the Pacers? We'll break it all down today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Wednesday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes, and today I want to dive into the center position for the Pacers. I would say the least amount of certainty at a position on the roster. Maybe you could say two, but at least the players there are young and are trending in a direction that makes sense for the Pacers to want to know what's going on, and they could, in theory, have a starter level player there, and they certainly could have injured Nembhard be their starting two. At the 5, they lose Myles Turner. They've described going through this by committee approach. Do they have a starting level player right now? Do they have a plan to get one in the future? How could they? How should they? What will that actually look like? And why do I suspect personally that a trade for a center will maybe be not quite required, but approaching that level at some point in the next season and a half? And what kind of player should they be looking for in such a trade? Let's start with the current thing going on at the 5, right? And that is this Jackson, Huff, Wiseman, Bradley quartet, this by committee approach. Obviously, Jackson, Huff project to be the heaviest minute guys at the spot, but there's more depth and nuance to it than just that. And they need to figure out if those guys can be any sort of long-term solution. What if they're not? And salary-wise, what if they're not? Like, good starters in the NBA typically make or cost, not always, right? If you time the market right, signing a player, if you have a guy on a rookie deal, whatever, they can be cheaper than this, but good starters cost $20 million plus. Like, very much so more than that in a lot of cases now, $25 million more plus, right? The Pacers have a couple underpaid guys in their team. And so the Pacers, just straight up can't get, it's hard for them to get an expensive player. And that's not to say that expensive is good or bad on its own, but what you think of as a starting level player is hard for them to get. They won't have more than the mid-level exception as an option in trade, in free agency for a while. They won't have cap space for a while. And so it's going to be challenging to get someone of that price point, of that level, onto their team. So how is this going to work at center? They could draft somebody, maybe the committee style works, but did it before, right? Carlisle has talked about, and the Pacers have talked about Rick specifically doing this, the committee approach in his past, right? And there's some up for interpretation of what specific seasons that actually was happening for Dallas. But I think the most obvious time was the kind of not floating through nature, because they had good players. It's kind of similar to what the Pacers have now, but the time between when they had Tyson Chandler before they traded for Kristaps Porzingis, right? So late in the Dirk era to early in the Luka era, when here's how the Mavs center situation kind of worked out, right? The first year, the rotation was Zaza Pachulia, JaVale McGee, and Salah Mejri, right? And if you're, if you've been keeping up with the NBA for a while, Zaza's good, JaVale's good. They're not quite at that level of obvious starter, this is the solution. And then the next year, with Mejri still around, it's Nerlens Noel, Dwight Powell, and Andrew Bogut. Totally different by committee. And then the next year's Maxi Kleber, Dwight Powell, Nerlens Noel. So now Maxi Kleber's in the mix, and Salah Mejri's still kind of hanging out all this whole time. And then DeAndre Jordan is there, and then eventually Kristaps Porzingis is there. So they did do by committee, but it didn't work, right? And the difference between it didn't not work. The players they had playing were good, but they were still looking for solutions the whole time, because a lot of those guys were either low-end level starters or high-level backups, and they needed more at the spot, and they were searching for it and how to get it. So the difference between those Mavs and these Pacers is that was the end of Dirk. And so they were less competitive. They were shifting from era to era. It wasn't a priority, they have to right now get an awesome center, but they still were wandering in how to do it. And I wonder if the Pacers will get caught in that spot and have to figure out how to get somebody good. And that is where the problem therein lies, is what I started with, in that the resources to actually get that player are not available as a spending power thing. You cannot get a good starting you can get probably the 20, with the non-taxpayer mid-level exception, which is probably the highest spending power the Pacers will have in the next couple of years. in free agency, that you could probably get a, low end starting level center. And some of you will be like, well, DeAndre Ayton just went into that. He's a starting level center. Yeah, but he took that deal because he got bought out. His total salary for the season is much higher than his actual contract with the Lakers, right? Like good centers get what like Naz Reid and Myles Turner, obviously, and that kind of player got this summer. That's much more than the non-tax mid-level. So actually straight up signing someone to eventually be done with the by committee approach is going to be challenging. So the answer to the what does the future of the Pacers center position look like, I think the absolute best, awesomest case scenario for the Pacers is that it's Isaiah Jackson or Jay Huff, and one of them turns into like a clear as day level starter. They both have multiple years left on their deal of cheap contract level. Maybe even Wiseman turns into a good to great player, right? They all have multiple years of cheap contract left, right? That's a good way to build your team if you have, a player who's underpaid. And the Pacers, I think, currently have 2 starters who fit that category. So that's the best, rosiest outlook for the Pacers at center. I would also put that as pretty unlikely, not because I don't think Jackson and Huff are good. I do. I just don't necessarily think that they are starter level players right now. And it's very rare that, players this late in their career after 4+ years just suddenly vault up to, not that it hasn't happened before, it has, but it's very unusual to vault up like a several tiers of ability. And so that leads you to where the Pacers are now. They don't have the signing resources to get an awesome big, and they don't internally have a player who projects to slide up into that level of player. So they have to trade, most likely, to get a starting caliber center. Let's go back to the spending power. They like to get a $20+ million center, aka a starting level guy, they'd have to send out money, right? To match the salaries. And that's another problem. Do they want to do that? Are they willing to trade a couple of their bench guys or one of their starters for a center? Like, what if they don't want to do that? They might not want to do that. Now they could if they get like the dream fit center. I don't even know who that would be. I'm just, hypothesizing. Maybe they would do that. But I think that would be tricky. Salary matching for the Pacers is hard because they have a lot of good contracts and they have a lot of players who have values in their current deal that giving them up is painful. And that's what makes a trade. But still, it would be tricky for them to give up kind of any of their rotation players for a good center, unless it was like a huge upgrade or a really good player. They might not want to do that. Obviously, it would depend on what the trade actually is. But that's like, you don't want to trade a similar level impact player on the perimeter for a center. That's just not smart asset management with the way the center position is. And that lands me on the conclusion that at some point in the next year, 2 years, whatever, by the trade deadline of 2027, so Haliburton is playing basketball again, the Pacers probably need to trade for a center who either is currently on their rookie contract and thus makes a low enough amount of money that they can be traded for using an exception, and then they will be paid like a starter when that contract is done, or trade for a big man who does not have a lot of time left on his current deal and is extension eligible or in free agency would get starter level money, because then if they're properly paid, they can be traded at that salary number. And obviously they need a player of that ability level. And so there are lots of guys that kind of fit that bill. We talked about some of them right after Myles left for Milwaukee, right? Could they trade for this guy, that guy? How's this going to work? And they trade for Jay Huff, and we'll run through some of those names again. The most natural path for it is just like a young big who's on a rookie scale deal. And we'll mention some of the names. There's not that many that are actually good and could be available. Like, you could just name any center rookie. Oh, Victor Wembanyama, Derek Lively. Like, yeah, they're not available, right? So it's hard to find that middle ground of potentially available and meets this criteria. There are some vets, but if they make less than the mid-level can be used as a trade exception now. That is a way for the Pacers to acquire a center who's very talented, but presently on a contract that does not reflect that talent level, and then pay them that amount and have a good center in the future when it's time. Obviously, the financial decision would maybe force them to lose someone at that time, but all these factors together, to me, are why I think a trade for a center who is making $14.1 million or less in the next season or season and a half, but is due to make more or is more talented than that level, is something the Pacers should be trying to do somewhat soon. Let's talk about some names. Let's do Tony's least favorite thing and name specific players who fit the criteria of this sort of trade machination coming up here on Locked On Pacers. Before we do that, we need to talk about Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. Monarch Money can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. So many surprising things you can notice when you use the app, like how much you're spending on specific categories. Too much takeout or subscriptions? Perfect. Monarch Money will let you know. They have everything you need in one app. It's super easy to manage your day-to-day money. If you share your finances with somebody, Monarch helps you stay on the same page so you can chase your financial goals and keep everything right in one place where you need it. If you've ever been surprised by how fast your spending adds up, you can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off of your first year. We are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making this your first listen today and every single day. Your second listen, Locked On Clippers. They signed Jordan Miller today. Not a lot has happened. Locked On NBA, Wes Goldberg and I on game night went through our most overrated and underrated off seasons. I had a lot of fun talking about the Charlotte Hornets and the Portland Trailblazers, and we talked about some big market teams too. Let's talk about centers that are young and why they specifically matter for this criteria that I've described. When you're drafted, you are not a free agent. You are subject to the rookie scale. If you're picked in the first round, if you're picked in the second round, there's other stuff going on, but whatever. So what that means is if you're a good player within your first 4 years in the NBA, you are just going to be underpaid, right? And then after year 4, you get presumably paid closer or up to, in some cases, more than your market value. And that is why, for the Pacers, this is sort of a built-in sweet spot for them, potentially, to acquire someone. If someone is already good, that obviously helps the Pacers, who are good. If they're on a rookie scale deal, they're probably young. The Pacers are mostly young, right? A lot of guys with 5 years of experience or less. I think only 3 guys with more than that on the whole team. And if they are on a rookie scale deal, they're cheap enough that the Pacers could trade for them without either sending out a lot of money or just straight up taking them in to a salary cap exception, like their DPE for Haliburton, like their non-tax mid-level, and then at some point in the future, being willing to pay them. And if they're actually good and they're a good fit, perfect. They should want to pay them in that case. So that's why the rookie scale guys are the sweet spot, because if you're off your rookie scale and you make more, it's harder for the Pacers to quite fit you in a trade. And there are some guys who make small enough amounts that doesn't really matter. We'll talk about that to close this one out. But that rookie scale amount is kind of the sweet spot of if they're already good and they're young and they're going to make more in the future, but they don't currently make what they should be paid, perfect. The Pacers should, in theory, want that player. Here's the problem with that thought. Every team should want that player, right? That's a very valuable thing to have, is a player who is underpaid and good and young. And the third problem with that is, why would the team they're on want to give them up if that is all true? That's why it takes a very specific overlap of circumstances for those kind of players to wiggle free, like Tyrese Haliburton to the Pacers, or Aaron Nesmith on his rookie deal to the Pacers, or Obi Toppin on his rookie deal to the Pacers, right? It does happen quite a lot. It just takes specific circumstances. So they could do it, but it would take something unique. And that's why I have currently 6 names typed down, and I think 3 of them are just maybe not even that, right? That might not even be a guy. Donovan Clingan and Young Hansen, both are on the Blazers. And they're both good, and they can both comprise 48 minutes of play at the center spot, and then who cares? Why would you get rid of either of them? In fact, I don't think the Blazers should get rid of either of those players. And yet, they have 2 guys who qualify for this. And we'll talk about the Blazers in the third segment, too, when we talk a little bit more about veterans. But they have 2 guys who fit the bill. Both of them are in their first or second season. They're both young. They're both developing. And they both look like they could be good. Hansen might not fit the Pacers' timeline just because who knows how good he is. But Clingan was pretty good last year. Took him a while to get going. Those 2 do, I wouldn't say they're available. In fact, I'd say the opposite. They're probably not available. But Portland center situation at least makes me go, right? The one that everybody will probably expect me to say first is Walker Kessler. Walker Kessler is good. He has played with Tyrese Haliburton on Team USA settings before, obviously. He's a wonderfully good defender. He's been in trade rumors a lot. The thing about the Jazz is they have a ton of front court players. Filipowski is an awesome offensive player. He just won MVP of Summer League. He was good on offense last year for them. They obviously have Kessler. They have other front court talents, including Larry Markin, who they play at the 3, but they have other, players in this mix. Like, could he actually be available? Do they want to pay Walker Kessler? Are they ready to have guys being properly paid as they kind of develop into the next stage? Right? It makes sense why they would consider him a potentially movable piece, especially if the Jazz could get, players or picks or whatever that they like in return for him. So he's one that I'm like, man, that would make sense for the Pacers. But if the cost is so high, then what's the point, right? Is that really something the Pacers want to do? Is he the perfect fit? Can he keep up with the Pacers' speed? I don't know. But he is an interesting one. A guy that I've had a couple people ask me about that I'm just curious about on his current team is Yves Missi with the Pelicans. He was all rookie last year, I believe. I can't remember if he was like the last guy who made it or not. So he shouldn't be available. He shouldn't be available. However, he is on a team that has a new front office, which sometimes is a sign of change of direction or change of priorities. Granted, Yves Missi was very good. And that said front office just drafted Derek Queen and got Kevon Looney, and they have other bigs on their team like Karlo Matkovic, who was pretty good last year, right? Is Queen going to be a center? Is Looney going to be a center? Is Zion going to play enough of the 4 that they have to decide who's playing between all these guys? Is it possible that Yves Missi becomes available with a new front office who did not draft him and other front court players that are better or they did draft on the team? It's possible. Yeah, it's possible. I would not necessarily say that I expect it or anything, but that one is at least one that made me go, oh, let's talk about that. Another name I typed down that I would not is maybe less of a good answer here, but I'm still curious about is Jalen Duren. Jalen Duren is good, and he fits well with the Pistons, and he has this awesome chemistry with Desar Thompson. Why on earth would he become available? He's a developing defender. He's huge. He's a good rebounder. He'd be good on any team, including the Detroit Pistons, who have him and picked him and have started to develop him. Maybe he wouldn't be available. Maybe, just maybe, a team that has Beef Stew on their team already and is going to have to eventually, in the not-too-distant future, pay Desar Thompson and Ron Holland. Who's going to get squeezed out financially? Now the answer might just be Isaiah Stewart, and he's actually on the list for guys to talk about in the third segment, but also fits this bill. In theory, probably not as good of a choice here because he just got traded. But Mark Williams kind of fits this. Cheap right now, center, rookie scale deal on a team that who knows how much they like him. What if Malawach is awesome right away? What if Malawach stinks? Is Malawach technically one if he's on Mark Williams' team? Like that group of players, that type of player who's on rookie scale deals and young and who knows what their team thinks of them, all sort of fit the bill to me, but there's not that many that, again, like that's why I mentioned Derek Lively. Like there's a lot of guys who in theory fit the criteria that I'm describing, but just aren't going to be available. Like there's just no way. These guys, I can at least squint at their situation and go, maybe that this guy would be available. So keep an eye on those guys. Just as if something happens in their situation, could they be players that make sense for the Pacers? One more that's not technically a rookie scale deal. I might have him on the wrong side. Jay Lynn, not J Dub, Jay Lynn Williams. It's not a rookie scale deal, but he's young, he's cheap, and he makes less than the mid-level. And OKC is obviously going to be slamming into a financial cliff. And they just drafted a center, this Sorbet, I don't know how to say his name, kid from Georgetown. Is he going to be a guy that they have to eventually move on from to free up some salary? He's not quite on a rookie scale deal, but in theory makes sense to me. Keep an eye on those youngsters as guys who are potentially good, could be in line to be making more in the future, could be starter level players, but are currently not for one reason or another. And someone's going to comment and say, why didn't you say this guy? Why didn't you say this guy? Well, maybe I don't think they'll be as available as you, or maybe I just don't think they're as good as you, or maybe there's a million other reasons for this. There's this French center on the Wolves that I thought about for a second. I was like, no, they'd never trade him. He's good, but they have a lot of front court players on that team. There's a lot of guys you could squint and figure something out about, but these ones that I just said, keep an eye on them just to see if their situation changes anyway. Duren seems like a stretch. Both of the Portland guys seem like a stretch, but something about their situation at least made me think, I should keep an eye on that situation. Let's talk about veterans. We talked about this a little bit after Turner's departure, but more clarity on every team, more clarity on the Pacers center situation. Let's close out today's show with veteran centers who could fit the criteria of a good Pacers trade target. Back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making it your first listen today and every single day or second listen. Any of our Locked On shows covering the teams of these crazy restricted free agents. Tough time for Quentin Grimes, Josh Giddey, Cam Thomas, and Jonathan Kuminga on the market right now. Will they be signed? Will they take the qualifying offer? What's going to happen there? Those shows can help you. Something to mention is that, like, obviously the free agent center class next year is like decent, right? Hartenstein, depending on his option. Mitchell Robinson's unrestricted. Robert Williams, Mo Wagner, Nick Richards, Drummond. He's not good anymore. But there will be like some good centers available as free agents next year. Are any of those guys I just said actually starter level centers? Yeah, I think Mitchell Robinson probably is, and that's it. If Isaiah Hartenstein's option gets picked up by the Thunder. So again, trading for somebody whose situation makes them available, but they're still good enough that their contract could go up and they could grow into a starting level player makes a lot of sense for the Pacers. Who is cheap enough? Who could wiggle free? Who in the veteran groups? What I've called this in my notes is expiring contract centers or soon expiring contract centers. And that's relevant because that either means they're extension eligible or they're about to be a free agent that could have a bumped up salary for trade purposes for the Pacers or real purposes. They get paid more because they're good. That would be the group that I would be saying these are the vets that I would get it if the Pacers trade for them. Something about their salary, their ability, or their current team situation makes them an interesting target. Now, there's some guys I typed down that have hard trade in parentheses after their name, which means they fit this criteria technically, but they make more than the non-tax pyramid level exception. So trading for them is hard. The Pacers have to match salary, and that's not easy to do in their situation without like blowing past the tax or like trading stuff that actually is good or valuable. So like Zach Collins, he's not that great, but he's expiring technically. He probably would receive a pay decrease next year. But Isaiah Hartenstein, Yusuf Nurkic, hilariously, like all those guys are talented, I guess, but they make so much that they are a challenging specific trade piece, and they're just more like, see if they're available in the future, perhaps they could be a Pacers fit. The rest of the list, though, Mo Wagner, 1 year, $5 million with the Magic, right? Could he be a starting level player? Who knows? He's coming off of a torn ACL. He's on a team with lots of centers. There'll be lots of Magic guys coming up in this segment. Could any of them be starter level? Could any of them be worthy of a deal closer to $20 million? It'd be hard to pay Mo Wagner $20 million. You can't extend him at that number. You can't sign him at that number, but he is a good player. Andre Drummond, he's just not that great anymore, but he does fit this criteria, expiring on a $5 million deal. Wendell Carter is a guy I keep coming back to. The Magic are going to maybe duck the tax. They're so close to it. Teams usually as close as they do try to get under. He makes about 10.7, I think, million is his cap at this year. And then he has an extension that starts next year that almost starts at 20 million. I think it's like a 3-year, $57 million extension for Wendell Carter starting next season. So another reason for the Magic, who are about to be dealing with financial, not hell, they're paying good players fairly, but a tougher financial situation. If they could just straight up get off of Wendell Carter, trade his $10 million to the Pacers, they fit it in the non-tax mid-level, and then when his contract goes up, they don't have to deal with it. Like, that does make sense as a trade fit to me, but he's also a good player and a starting level player for a team that could win the East. Why would the Magic be wanting to dump him right now? But I'm at least keeping an eye on Orlando. I already said Vucevic, hard trade. He's a good player on the Bulls, making $20 million right now. He's not worth $20 million. Isaiah Hartenstein, we did. Jonas Valanciunas, he fits into the mid-level. His contract with a team option could be expiring next year. He probably doesn't want to be in the NBA anymore, it seems like. So tough one there, but again, fits the contract criteria that we've laid out. Nick Richards actually got linked to the Pacers by Michael Scotto. Keep an eye on that, obviously. He makes less than on-tax mid-level. He's probably underpaid at his $5 million, but he's not a starting level center. He's a good rotation level center, though. Certainly, the Nick Richards interest should have been a tip that, like, the Jay Huff trade and similar deals should have been more like obvious or telling for the Pacers, by the way. I thought that when I typed his name down. There's Jalen Williams, so I typed just straight up in the wrong column for some reason. Mitchell Robinson's an interesting one here. The Knicks brought in Yabusele. They still have Karl Towns. They have a new head coach. Who knows how much that coach is going to prioritize Mitchell Robinson. Mitchell Robinson is a very interesting one to me. Why would the Knicks move him, right? Like, that question makes me go, why am I typing this down? He's a good player on a team that could win the East this year. He gave the Pacers so much trouble in the playoffs. His rebounding was huge. They were like way better with him on the floor. And then they got another big in free agency. And again, they have Cal on their team. Like, can they afford to pay him? They're expensive, right? He's deserving of a raise. He's a starting level center, and he makes less than mid-level this year. His salary decreases over last year. I actually would understand him being a trade candidate, and that's why I typed him down. And that one I'm putting in the Wendell Carter category of like, because he's a free agent after this year, he'd be making starter level money. Mitchell Robinson would, to me, maybe he'd be like the 20th best center in the league. Like, that makes sense to me. And he'd fit well with the Pacers. Mitchell Robinson, put him in the either young center or Wendell Carter category of like, I would understand this very much for the Pacers. This makes a lot of sense. Goga, welcome to another Pacers podcast. He's on Mo Wagner and Wendell Carter's team. He is good. He expires in 2 years. And he doesn't make very much right now. He's probably not starter level, but he's good. He's a quality player. So he probably does not quite qualify. All right, back to the Blazers. Robert Williams is on the Blazers. Robert Williams has in the past been awesome, like starter level defensive big, certainly. And he got paid pretty well after that season with Boston, and then has dealt with like a trillion injuries since. And that's why his value is not very high. It might just be like free, honestly. So last 3 seasons, 3 combined seasons. Again, let me reiterate what I'm saying out loud. Since 2022-23, Robert Williams has played 61 total games. He has never played more than that exact number, 61 in a season. His trade value might be negative on his current deal. When he plays, he's good. He's an interesting one to me for the Pacers just to like sniff around on if you were available. And then 2 guys who kind of don't fit the criteria that I've set up for this segment, which is their contract expires soon, and then they could slide into a salary slot that makes more sense for the Pacers or makes more sense for them. You know, that's kind of what everybody I just said kind of fit into, although some of those guys probably wouldn't get the salary slot that I'm describing. There's 2 guys who make in the mid to high teens that are good and that are on a team that either is in a salary or front court situation that to me would at least like I could squint and be like, oh, you could be available as a good center. One of them is Isaiah Stewart, who for the opposite reason of Duren, like if he's Duren's backup, but the Pistons can't afford all these guys. Here comes the apron and tax boogeyman, right? They're going to have to pay Asar and Holland eventually. They're still a couple seasons away from that, but still, Beef Stew at $50 million, he's good, man. Isaiah Stewart's really good when he plays. Injuries have been a thing for him, but he's good. He's tough. He can spread the floor out. He'd be a good fit, I think, with the Pacers, should he actually be available. And then Daniel Gafford, who got an extension that I believe is exactly the max extension he could get and still be trade eligible immediately. People interpret that as meaning like the Mavs are up to something. The reason that the way that works is the way that you are trade eligible immediately after an extension is that you sign an extension that you could have just signed with another team, right? So that doesn't really signal that a trade is imminent to me, although maybe it ups his trade value just that he's on that deal for so long, especially if he plays well. That team has Derek Lively. That team has Anthony Davis. That team has Cooper Flagg. That team has PJ Washington. That team has Najee Marshall. That's a lot of front court dudes. Daniel Gafford is good and has this year plus the extension left on his deal. He, I think, would fit into the young player and or Wendell Carter, Beef Stew, Rob Williams category, Mitchell Robinson, I guess, of keep your eyes peeled. This would make a lot of sense to me for the Pacers as a trade target and for the other team to actually consider for some reason or another. That's what I think about the future of the Pacers at center. That's how they can get a player that I think makes sense for their team. But the hope for the Pacers should be that Isaiah Jackson or Jay Huff is the answer to their problems. We'll deep dive into Huff tomorrow. Tomorrow's show is one of my favorite, and listeners seem to love this every offseason. I got an expert who has covered or deeply scouted or watched all of the Pacers newbies onto one show. So a Marquette, someone who covers Marquette, talking for 10 minutes about Cam Jones, someone who covers the Grizzlies for 10 minutes about Jay Huff, and then a draft expert on Taylor Peter. Really looking forward to that. And then Friday, it's August, we'll do Veteran Questions, the Daniel Tice show that I've been doing every summer since Daniel Tice. And then next week, it's August. The fun stuff, the zany stuff, and a mailbag is coming. So I hope you guys enjoy all that. Lots of good stuff coming here on Locked On Pacers. Hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony R. East. This podcast is on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Pacers on both. Thank you all so much for listening. We will see you very soon.